want a better life for my family. What's next?
I'm looking to better my career. What's next?
I just graduated from high school. What's next?
I dropped out of high school. What's next?
I'm the first in my family to go to college. What's next?
I just lost my job. What's next?
I just got out of the military. What's next?
I've just been released from prison. What's next?
I don't know what's next for me.
Don't know what's next for you? Join me, Dr. Renee Cintron, on the What's Next Louisiana podcast and discover the possibilities with Louisiana's community and technical colleges.
Welcome to the What's Next Louisiana podcast. My name is Renee Cintron. Today we have a very special show to celebrate and commemorate Black History Month. If you want to hear more about our podcast, you can follow us on Twitter at GoLCTCS. Use the hashtag What'sNextLA. You can find more information on our website, lctcs.edu/what'snextla. You can reach us by email, what'snextlouisiana@gmail.com. We're back with our show celebrating Black History Month. And with us, we have Monica Morrison, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Services, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at River Parishes Community College. Monica, how are you?
I'm doing great, Renee. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm excited to be here. I am new to the LCTCS system. I transferred from Mississippi. I was a transplant there for 20 years, and now I'm here. I joined RPCC in 2019 and am having a wonderful time. I'm glad to be a part of the celebration of Black history, but more importantly than that, our system-wide effort to increase awareness about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Monica. I'm glad you transplanted here with us. It's really good to have you, and the conversations we've had in the committee meetings are wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that you've been involved with as a system committee member across the state?
Well, I'll tell you, being invited to be a part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force at the system level has been such an honor. It is the only effort of its kind I've ever been a part of. I did come from a community college in Mississippi, and so, there's so much going on in our society and in our world now that this current push is necessary, I think, to remind us of what's important and bring us back to those values that really help keep us molded together. The DEI task force has several subcommittees, and currently I'm on the Institutional Infrastructure and College Culture subcommittee. I was particularly interested in that one because, as you know, culture building is a mindset, isn't it? And so depending on what your particular filters are, your life experiences, your mindset could be consistent with the values that we want to promote as diversity and equity and inclusion, or it might not be. And so we want to create a culture that makes people more aware of the importance of those things, and not just at certain times of the year, not just in February or June or whenever those dates may arise, but throughout the year. And so I've been working with other partners across the system and have found that the committee has kind of centralized a lot of like-minded individuals who want the same thing. And I commend Dr. Sullivan for this system-wide effort, because to me, it means that no matter where you go across the state, if you visit an LCTCS college, you're going to feel the impact of how important diversity, equity, and inclusion is in creating awareness and belonging and really prioritizing that in everything we do. Recently at RPCC, we changed titles to adopt some more diversity and inclusion verbiage. We were also looking at mission statements and room name changes. And so we realized that micro messaging is important. And being on the task force has brought that to light and helped me to see that in areas I never recognized it before.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We're having an episode here talking about Black History Month, and that is definitely, like you said, not just something to focus on in February, but throughout the year, the efforts behind diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tell me a little bit about, Black History Month and the significance that it carries for you, for the institution, and so on.
I think that's a great question. I'll tell you, as the granddaughter of a state librarian, growing up, I didn't get to watch much TV at grandma's house. So there was lots of reading to do because my state librarian grandmother was also a teacher. And she was a big proponent of Black history and history at large, because knowing where you came from gives you a baseline. And if we don't have a baseline, we don't know when we've improved or when we still need improvement. And my grandfather was one of the first African-Americans to work for the Arkansas Governor's Dislocated Workers Task Force. So when we think about Black history, it's large, and that there are so many prominent people who we may feel disconnected to. But I think if we look a little harder inside our own family lines, we might find instances when Black history hits closer to home. In fact, at the school I came from in Mississippi, I was the first African-American career and technical dean, and that was in 2015. So we're still making Black history even today.
Thank you, Monica, for that. In continuing our celebration here of Black History Month, I want to bring in the Bears from Baton Rouge Community College. We have a team here of 4 of our faculty members and professors that are joining the crew to talk about their experiences, give us some information that we should know about, the things that I may not know, that you may not know about Black History Month, which is really important. So I'm going to introduce the team here first, and then I have a couple of questions for each of them. So with us, we have Erica Burrell, who's the Associate Professor of Race Relations and Sociology. Woo! Ben Lowenkron, who is the Academic Support Coordinator and Professor of English and the Humanities. Hey! No, nobody else is clapping, so I have to do it for the team here at the Bears. Alan Forrester, who's the Professor of African American History. Woohoo! And B. Gyimah, Professor of English and Humanities. Thank you all very much for being here. What I want to do is go around and similar question that I just asked Monica about the significance of Black History Month to you, to the institution. And also, can you tell us a little bit about what you're teaching in your courses that contributes to Black history, as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that we're seeing across our institutions? Erica, we'll start with you.
Well, I just want to say thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And it's an amazing time to be given this opportunity. I think in light of just the history behind the need for Black History Month itself, the reason why we even have a Black History Month is because you had so many neglected pillars of the American society whose contributions were going unnoticed. And so the need for a Black History Month, which didn't start off as a Black History Month, which started off as just a week in the beginning. And so it has grown to a month. And hopefully moving forward, it won't be something that has to be confined to a month. But as Ms. Morrison said, it's something that we are gaining an appreciation for, or searching for an appreciation for, throughout every day of the year. And so in my particular courses in race relations, it's evident that it would be a part of our consistent conversations, not just Black history, because Black history is American history, if that makes sense. And so just to begin to help the students to navigate in the spaces that are missing in terms of what history in our traditional educational classes sometimes glosses over for the sake of protecting students, I think. But it also leaves them at a place where when they are finally faced with the reality of the history of our country, they feel a little overwhelmed with the breadth of information that they didn't receive in school. And so I think Black History Month is not just the time to talk about the challenges that were overcome, but many of the major contributions that so many minorities have given to this country.
Thank you, Erica. I really appreciate your take on that. Echoing Monica's sentiment of it's more than the month. It's something that we should know about and be aware of for Black history, for other American history that we experience every day. Ben, I want you to address, you're an academic support and you also teach English. So what are the things that you're doing with students?
Thank you, Renee, and thank you again for having me here today. This is a fantastic discussion, and I'm really glad to be here with these awesome peers. I want to go back to something to begin here that Ms. Morrison said about culture building is a mindset. And I want to connect it to something that Professor Burrell just said too, about the idea, the truth that Black history is American history. And it's even more than that. You keep widening that out and it can become even world history. And that's where I come in. My course that I teach here at Baton Rouge Community College is Africa, India, and the Middle East. All right, now it's a humanities course. Now imagine, if you will, you're taking this course, you signed up for it, and you show up, and the first day this guy walks in. What's the first thing you notice? You could say it, Renee.
You're bald?
It's so funny. A lot of students go the same way. They say you have a beard.
You have a beard.
But the point is, they don't want to say it. Some of them eventually do say that white dude, right? And so a lot of times, and coming in, the expectation is, well, what is exactly happening here? And so the important thing that I want to bring to the table in my course is actually about global mirrors and personal discovery. All right, the interaction between cultures. If we all agree that the biological imperative we have is to survive, right? Is we got to keep surviving, right? So how do we explain things like first responders, people whose entire essence in their professional job is to drop as soon as the alarm goes off and run to the aid of others, thus overcoming their one biological imperative to survive, right? Well, that's because they're part of a culture. They're in firefighter culture, right? And so they take part in it. There's rituals to it. There's uniforms to it, and it's ingratiated in them what that means. And that's great. But that can also work in a negative side too, all right? The cultures that we get brought up in and what we teach ourselves about ourselves are very important in shaping how we react to the world around us. So through my course, I really want our students to investigate who they are, where they've come from, and to do so by looking at cultures that we don't normally get to study in K through 12 education, no matter where you happen to be in this country. Africa, India, the Middle East, that's a huge portion of this world. And the history that you have there is tied so intricately to our own history. Something like if we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr., right? And you say, well, what kind of connection does he have to India? Well, his mentor, Howard Thurman, traveled to India, studied with Gandhi, learned about nonviolent resistance in that way, and then brought that back. And in fact, Martin Luther King Jr. went to visit India as well and brought these ideas around. And Gandhi himself started his own protests in South Africa, all right, when he was there as well. So you see the interconnectedness here of cultures as they try to navigate with each other. So it is about having a mindset, a curious mindset, knowing where you're from, knowing where your neighbors are from, your classmates are from, your professor is from, and then seeing how those cultures can really interact. That's something we do then at my day job at the Center for Undergraduate Student Achievement at BRCC, which is part of a PBI grant that we have from the U.S. Department of Education. And the idea there is to be like a testing lab, to try to find a way to create an honors college that will address systemic issues in creative new ways, so that we can take something like investigating who you are locally in terms of just Baton Rouge. You happen to grow up on which side of Florida, right? Florida Boulevard will determine a lot then about where things might happen, what opportunities you have. What does that mean for you as a first generation college student, as someone on financial aid, and just kind of get your cultural bearings together.
Thank you, Ben. The mindset aspect that you mentioned and echoed, and the fact that you have melding cultures that impact our own history, that's very fascinating. And I can keep talking with you about this forever, but I want to move on to Alan and let you chime into the Black History Month conversation and what you do. Maybe some of the content that you discuss in your courses, anything that you want to add, Alan.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to be here. I teach African-American history. Obviously, it's always African-American History Month in my world. And in fact, I think it's so important that I tell my students that we're basically saving civilization one day at a time when they come to class. Every day is important. It's unfortunate that most Americans don't know much about their history at all. And most of what they do know or think they know by the time they get to college is wrong because they've been protected, or because, especially around African-American history and issues of race, that's something that the majority of white grade school teachers don't want to touch because they're afraid of students or they're afraid of parents, which is sad, but it's true. If you take my class in African-American history, I very much do the same thing that Professor Lowenkron just talked about. I show up the first day, I wear either a white linen suit or a seersucker suit and try to look as Southern as I possibly can because I am the man when I walk in the room. And then we talk about that. And it forces an interesting discussion about why African-American history is important, why Black history is important. I personally think that you ought not to be able to get out of school in American colleges without taking either a race relations class or an African-American history class, because we don't, even though we're here in the same space, and Baton Rouge is a very good example of this, we're right here side by side. We're split down the middle 50% population wise, which is one of the only places in the country that's like this. But we really don't know each other. We don't know our cultures. We don't understand each other. And I really think that the way that I approach African-American history is, it is definitely a part of American history. It's probably the most important part in a lot of ways, because it sets up the entire system that we deal with today. I don't think it's just about students trying to understand their past. I think it's very much about them trying to understand what is going on in the world today and how confusing it is and how we got here. One of my heroes is a historian who's been passed away for a while now, but his name was Howard Zinn. And Zinn was very much an activist as a historian. He didn't believe necessarily that you needed to be neutral as a historian. And I tell my students, my class is probably going to be depressing. It's probably going to make you mad, because if they know anything about African-American history, they know some of the successes. They know people who broke the system, who helped change the system. But that doesn't necessarily help them understand how the system got to be the way it is, how power operates in the modern United States or in the world, or things like, in world history, it's not just a one-way exchange from the old world to the new. The South Africans came to the United States and studied the Southern states' laws on segregation to learn how to set up their apartheid system. Hitler was a great fan of American segregation and American Indian policy before he came to power. And so what I'm trying to do with my students is give them enough ammunition and enough knowledge that they can go out and start thinking about how things can be different, and that things can be different, because these things that we treat as ancient truths are not ancient truths. Most of them happen because if you look at English America, you make a very good argument that English North America did not need slavery economically at the beginning. But at a certain point, a handful of great planters in Virginia decided that it was politically a good idea to switch from white indentured servitude to African slavery. They made a decision for that to come to English America and thus become a huge part of what becomes the United States. If humans made those decisions, we can undo those decisions just as well and make things at least more humane, if not better. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from. I think it's very much where most everybody in the conversation is coming from too.
Thank you for that. Something you said, especially about the undoing decisions that we've done. It's something you said a couple of times. I'm connecting dots here, but understanding today by studying the past and how we can make changes or do things differently in the future. So I picked up on that message throughout your statements, and that that's what you do with your students. You give them the ammunition, the knowledge, which is power, to make those decisions differently as we have in the past. So I'm gonna introduce here B. Anything to add to the conversation? I want to hear from you about your take on Black History Month and what you do as a professor of English and Humanities at Baton Rouge Community College.
First of all, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to be a part of this outstanding panel with my dynamic colleagues at BRCC. This is an honor, and also to be able to be here with you and your listening audience. And so I'm honored to be a professor at BRCC, where I teach English as well as humanities. And so I've taught at BRCC for nearly 13 years now. And as a result of teaching literature and ethnicity back in 2009, which I currently teach also literature and ethnicity, I founded and established the I Too Am America Club. And this is a multicultural awareness student organization at Baton Rouge Community College, where we celebrate the nationally recognized cultural heritage celebrations. And this particular organization is founded on the principles of multicultural awareness, and particularly multicultural education, as the members are able to learn about those months besides just February being Black History Month, but the other months that they may not be aware of, where different cultures are celebrated for their heritage, their histories, their experiences, and all that they have done to greatly impact this nation. For instance, from September 15th to October 15th, we celebrate Hispanic American Heritage Month. We celebrate Native American Heritage Month in November, Women's History Month in March, and we've had other celebrations, including a celebration of Italian American Heritage Month and Irish Heritage American Month. And so we have been so blessed to be able to produce 2 issues of a race and ethnic studies journal that were published in 2013 and 2015. And these are issues of the journal, America the Beautiful in Spite of It All. And students that were a part of the I Too Am America Club, as well as students who were within my literature and ethnicity classes and a few within my English composition courses, they were able to write poetry and ethnic autobiographies that talked about their understanding of who they are. And especially within my literature and ethnicity class, the students are introduced to a diverse array of different authors that they may not have gotten exposure to early on in high school or even in middle school. And so they study the duality of being an American and a minority within African American, Native American, Hispanic American, and also Asian American literature. And they look at how these individuals are coming to grips with who they are, as well as the different labels, treatment, and the different barriers that are set in place that can either stifle their progress, or they can combat those particular barriers and assert their own sense of selfhood and be able to not only just overcome these issues, but to be able to thrive and to tell their stories and experiences with their audiences. And so for these students, they're able to have a greater understanding of who they are, but then also a greater understanding of the fact that each one of them matters within this lifetime, and they all have the power within to do exceptional things, not only meant for the betterment of themselves and their families, but also for the betterment of all people here in America. And so within the race and ethnic studies journals, as well as the students being able to present their work, both locally, regionally, and nationally, the students have been given several different opportunities that provided for them transformative possibilities, and that of which is becoming a published writer. And so for many of these students, they were able to present their work at different national conferences. Locally, they presented at the Louisiana Book Festival at the state capitol in 2014, which was wonderful. And the journals have been recognized by the late great Dr. Maya Angelou, as well as the late great Miss Donna Brett in 2016, when she honored myself and the writers with the Power of Nine Award. And so some of the libraries in Baton Rouge have the books, but we're very proud to say that the books have been archived at the nation's library, the Library of Congress.
That is excellent. That the fact that students have the opportunity to express their voices and tell their stories in that way, that lasts a lifetime. I mean, these documents are produced and they're, like you said, in the Library of Congress, they're existing forever. That is amazing work. I wish we had the whole day to go through what it is that happens in the at 2 a.m. America.
It's based off of the poem by the great Langston Hughes of the Harlem Renaissance, his poem I Too, where he talks about being marginalized in America. But instead of internalizing this with an inferiority complex, he says that, he eats and grows strong because he knows at a certain point there will come a time when those who have made him or tried to make him feel as though he was lesser or inferior, they will be ashamed, because at that moment in time, he will show just how beautiful he is and will show that he also is a part of America. He says that he is the darker brother and he's sent to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but he doesn't get sad or feel as though he's lesser. Instead, he laughs at this and he eats well and he grows strong because he knows at a certain point in America, he will be recognized, and all those who sought to silence him, they will have to come into reckoning with him and right those wrongs. And that is exactly what is occurring within this particular moment in American history right now.
Thank you for that. And it's important to refer to those moments and to realize that, as Professor Allen was mentioning, Professor B here, that we are understanding today by looking at our past, and that's very important. I know we've talked about courses and content and academic support and organizations that each of the students at Baton Rouge Community College have access to, but that's not unlike other of our colleges. They have access to similar courses, similar support, similar clubs that are active and doing various things that are intended to remove barriers and help students thrive in their goals. So we've talked about courses, and I'm going to open it up to the entire group here. What can someone do in a program of study? What do they do after taking your class? What is it that a student can do once they've completed your course?
Well, for many of my students that are in my literature and ethnicity classes, and also within my humanities class, because I also teach the humanities course that is geared towards a better understanding of India, Africa, and the Middle East. And so I have to thank my colleague, Professor Lowenkron, for that, because he recommended me to teach that class. And it has been a wonderful experience for myself and for my students. So thank you, Professor Lowenkron. And so with teaching these two courses, students are able to have an understanding of the fact that each and every one of us, at a certain moment within our lives, if it has not already occurred, someone will try to question or diminish our humanity. It doesn't matter who you are. And so within these two classes, I introduce them to the work of the great Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. And they look at the concept of double consciousness, how they have an understanding of how they define themselves, as well as an understanding of how others seek to define them. And they have to decide which definitions will they allow to dictate their sense of being and to dictate who they are, what they can achieve within this lifetime. And so when students take my classes, they're able to understand who they are in a way that they may not have ever truly come to terms with. And so the students unearth their past experiences, their own cultural experiences, and the experiences even of others who have played a huge part in shaping who they are. And I ask them to tell me, what is this sense of meaning that you have right now within yourself of who you are, what you can achieve, and what barriers and stumbling blocks have you witnessed that have tried to, in some sort of way, hinder your progress? And having knowledge of that, what can you do differently now so that you will not let anything get into the way of you being everything that you want to become within this lifetime? And part of that is them understanding the concept of double consciousness. And I tell all of my students that this is something that is cross-cultural. It's not something that's just a Black issue. Everyone at some point in their time on this earth will come to grips, or some people will never come to grips unfortunately, with the definitions that others have placed upon them, and whether or not they embrace those definitions, because not all definitions are negative. Some can be empowering, some can be very positive, but in most cases, they happen to be negative and disparaging. So how are you going to make sense of that so that you are able to still be all that you want to be, despite all that you have faced in the past? What sense can you make of that to turn the negative into the positive? And if things have been relatively positive for you, how can you keep that positive momentum going? And so I tell them that this is an issue, double consciousness, that permeates all of our existences. And so we have to make sense of it, but then we have to find power in it, as Dr. Du Bois did, and use that power to do great things, not only within our life, but within the lives of others. And in turn, it allows these students to have a sense of cultural appreciation, cultural competency, as well as cultural sensitivity, because they also get to learn the experiences of their peers within that class. And in turn, my hope is that it creates a more just and equitable society for us all.
The notion of continuous improvement, moving things from negative to positivity, and if you're positive, remaining that when spreading that positivity is amazing. I know that by taking the courses that you all have mentioned, students can also apply that towards their degrees, or they can transfer and continue their education at a university, or just learn like what you've just described, the change that happens in someone's life by being informed and empowered and armed, as others have said, with information. I think is wonderful. I want to go around the five of you and go with what's next. For you, for your students, for your institution, what's next in general? So we'll stay with you, B, and then we'll go backwards and finish up with Monica in a second. But B, what's next?
Well, for my I2M America Club members, actually, two of them will be performing tonight at the Black History Month celebration. One is a graduate of BRCC who lives in Texas who will be performing, and the other is a current student at BRCC. And so I'm very proud of Mr. Donovan Jackson and Mr. Chaz Anderson, and they both are brothers as well. So they will be the soloists this evening at the event. And then also members of the I2M America Club will be going on a virtual tour of the Smithsonian's African American History Museum at the end of this month. And earlier this month, they went on a virtual tour of the River Road African American Museum as well, that's located in Donaldsonville.
Thank you. Alan, we'll go with you. The question is, what's next?
And I hate following B. I'm sorry not to tear up after listening to you. Well, I mean, I figure I'm in it for the long haul. There are lots of things that students are going to be facing in their adult lives today, whether it's voting or dealing with the criminal justice system or just all manner of things in American life that hopefully I can help them be better at or make better decisions about. So other than that, I wasn't kidding when I said I was in a bus. I actually bought an RV and moved into it in January. So I'm hoping I'm going to do some traveling and do maybe some live video blogging for my students from some places where things actually occurred that we're talking about. So I'm working on that.
Excellent, excellent. So, Ben, what's next for you?
Well, I really want to dovetail off of a comment that Professor Forrester said here about persistence, right, and being long haul. I also want to say, Professor Gyimah, I'm really glad that you're teaching this course too. It's great to have someone else there teaching it. It really is a dynamic course. That's a general education course for those of you students out there. General education right there. There you go. Knock off that degree requirement and become a better person, right? But really, in terms of the course, in terms of the Center for Undergraduate Student Achievement, it's really about persistence. It's about getting access first to yourself, to understanding who you are, where you came from, then access to society after that. And that's kind of the harder one sometimes because there are things that might be blocking you from that. And then access to your future. The basic idea is just helping people to change the question, the statement "I am" into the statement "I am becoming," and to see that kind of dynamic attitude be brought to them, so they're not receiving what other people say about them. Going back to W.E. Du Bois' great point of the dual consciousness there, but actually becoming, your own. It's going to sound corny, but the captain of your own ship. The idea to kind of move forward as your own. So more specifically, through the center, we have things coming up like a Kitchen Table Talk 2.0 series. This Friday, we have Adam Bourgeois, who's the COO of Womack Construction, who's going to come talk. We bring these people in, these figures from all over the community and from all different levels who've broken through, and to talk about what they went through to get their breakthrough, and to help students get access to a vision of a future that is different than maybe anything they've considered before. So if you're interested about that, we have plenty of information on the Baton Rouge Community College website there as well. And then more events through the center itself, and just teaching as much as I possibly can, helping people to, what we all got into teaching for, have that light go on above their head and get that drive going. That's really what makes us, makes our life then activate even more. We're on the same journey as our students are as well. So that's what's next for us.
Thank you, Ben. Sounds excellent. Erica, what's next for you?
Well, for the last 3 years, my students in my race relations courses have been voluntarily participating in my digital journal of race. And so I would like to see, especially through the pandemic, I would like to see some of the what they would present this semester in terms of their experiences. But I really am looking forward to putting those videos together so that people can really see what the students, just their attitudes and their views on a lot of the issues that are facing our country every day. Is not just what we see on the news, but it's what our students are actually facing in their day-to-day lives. And so it's been really powerful, even for me, to see just how well-versed many of our students are as it relates to race, as it relates to their jobs, the changes they want to see in their education, the changes they want to see on their jobs. And so I'm just excited for other people to see what our students, what's on our students' minds. And the other thing that I'm interested in, and I mean, I'm with a wide variety of individuals who I think could possibly help with that, between Ms. Morrison and Ben and Ms. Gyimah and Mr. Forrest, but just to see students leave taking all of these courses that are beneficial to understanding diversity, but to leave with some type of certificate that expresses that they are committed to what we say we want. Not just, we have the diversity, but it's the next piece. It's the inclusion and the equity piece that I think a lot of times we struggle with around the country. And so I would look forward to working with any of you and pulling together the courses we have that would benefit the students in that way, so that when they go to future employers, they could say, hey, I'm committed to what your company says that you want, which is a commitment to diversity and inclusion.
That's an excellent idea. Monica, what's next for you?
Well, before I get to that, let me just say, Erica, I'm all in. Call me when you're ready. I do want to echo so much of what my wonderful co-panelists here have spoken to. And one of those things is the long haul. I think all of us can safely say that when you start the journey of Black history or cultural awareness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you've got to be committed to the long game, because change doesn't happen overnight. Mindsets often don't shift overnight. They're deeply rooted in how we were raised and our own personal filters. And for us at RPCC, speaking to what I mentioned earlier about taking Black history outside of the month of February, we've been very fortunate that this week we'll be launching a new initiative called Beyond the Block. And the Beyond the Block initiative is designed to do just that. Throughout the year, we'll have a series of activities, panel discussions, speaker series. We hope to do some museum virtual tours, some art exhibits, and cultural heritage activities that will help students keep Black history and cultural diversity and the importance of equity and belonging on the forefront of their minds all year long. My challenge to myself is speaking to what B said, Langston said, he's going to eat and grow strong. I'm going to put a lot out for them to eat. I'm going to try to find the best opportunities and the best resources so that they can know that those things they don't know, you know, as Alan spoke to, some of what they learn is limited by others' filters. And so also some of what they know is not altogether the truth. And so finding those resources and available options to help them know what's out there and to be more aware so that they can make more informed decisions and help to continue to lead the charge, because it's a long game. And so we're going to need lots of players beyond those that are already at the table.
Thank you very much, Monica. You know, you've just heard from a great panel of experts, not just about Black History Month, but cultural diversity, being better as a global citizen in general. And that is great. So I want to remind the audience of who just heard from Monica Morrison, who's the Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Services, the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at River Parishes Community College, Erica Burrell, Associate Professor of Race Relations and Sociology with Baton Rouge Community College, Ben Lowenkron, Academic Support Coordinator and Professor of English and Humanities, also with Baton Rouge Community College, Alan Forrester, Professor of African American History with Baton Rouge Community College, and B. Gyimah, Professor of English and Humanities with Baton Rouge Community College as well. This has been an honor for me to hear what you do, how you do it. I know it's just a snippet of it, but I am inspired by what you've done, definitely informed by what you've done and what you're doing, and just hearing what you have coming up next, from going around, traveling around to make videos about where history happens, to creating a certificate that demonstrates to employers that you have the training required to be inclusive and equitable in the workplace, is just impressive and amazing. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule from the things that you just mentioned, plus then some, to be here and spending it with me and the audience, celebrating, commemorating Black History Month. Thank you very much. For y'all listening and watching, if you want to know more about what we do here at the What's Next Louisiana podcast, you can follow us on Twitter at GoLCTCS. You can use the hashtag What's Next LA. You can visit our website for more information, lctcs.edu/whatsnextla. Thank you all very much. My name is Renee Cintron, and we just listened to Louisiana's Community and Technical Colleges What's Next Louisiana podcast.
Before we wrap things up, we want to take the time at the end of each episode to answer some questions from our listeners. If you have a question you would like us to answer, email us whatsnextlouisiana@lctcs.edu. You can visit us online at lctcs.edu/whatsnextla or tweet us at GoLCTCS. A special thanks to the What's Next Louisiana podcast team. Aquina Grant, LCTCS Director of Communications. Landon Corbin, LCTCS Coordinator of Digital Outreach. April Smith, North Shore Technical Community College, Livingston Campus Dean. Jason Leader, Nunes Community College, Director of Communications. Darian Atkins, Louisiana Delta Community College, Director of Community and Public Relations. Until next time, I'm Dr. Renee Cintron asking you, what's next, Louisiana?